When Lena Walsh returned to Meadowbrook, it wasn't for nostalgia. It was necessity. Her apartment in the city had been swallowed by debt collectors, and the job she'd cherished for 6 years disappeared after a corporate restructuring. Now, all she had were 2 overpacked suitcases, a rusting sedan, and a cautious hope that her family hadn't changed too much. But Meadowbrook had changed. Or maybe it was always like this, and she'd just been too young to see the cracks. The town hadn't grown. If anything, it looked like it had shrunk, a ghost of its former self with closed storefronts and peeling paint. But the Walsh estate remained immaculate, that imposing 2-story colonial home with its white porch swing and meticulous lawn, a symbol of old money and even older resentments. Lena stood at the wrought iron gate, the same one she used to swing open in a burst of energy after school. Now it creaked reluctantly, as if even it questioned her return. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. The front door was opened by her stepmother, Carolyn, blonde, brittle, and always perfectly made up, like grief had never touched her life. Her face registered a flicker of surprise, then tightened with restraint. "Lena," she said, voice clipped. "Well, you're back." "For a bit," Lena said, managing a smile. "I hope Dad's home." Carolyn stepped aside with a sigh that said this was already a problem. "He's in the sunroom." The house smelled the same, lemons and leather, and that made it harder, not easier. Lena passed the grandfather clock, the dusty photo of her as a child beside her late mother, and the new photo that had replaced it. Her father, Carolyn, and their daughter, Ivy. Her half-sister, the golden child. Her father, Thomas Walsh, sat reading the Wall Street Journal, glasses low on his nose. He looked older, thinner. His voice was gruff but not unkind. "Didn't know you were visiting." "I figured it'd be better as a surprise," Lena said, unsure whether she meant it. He folded his paper, studied her. "You look tired." "I am." A beat passed. "Well, you're welcome to stay. Ivy's room is still yours when she's at school." The words hit her like a cold draft. Ivy's room, not your room. She nodded anyway. Later that night, Lena sat on the back porch, watching the fireflies dance beyond the hedges. She sipped a glass of water, her fingers tightening around it as voices drifted from the kitchen. "She didn't even call first," Carolyn said. "She's been through a rough patch," Thomas answered, softer. "Everyone goes through things. But she's not the only daughter anymore. Ivy's preparing for law school. She doesn't need this drama distracting her." Lena walked away before she heard more. By day 3, she found out the truth. Her father had sold the cabin her mother left in her will, the one in the Berkshires Lena always thought would be her safe haven someday. Sold it, without ever mentioning it to her. "I needed the funds for Ivy's tuition," he said, almost casually. "You haven't exactly been involved in the family lately, Lena." Her stomach twisted. "Mom left that for me." "She left it for the family," he said, "and Ivy is family." No apology, no guilt, just dismissal. Lena didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply packed her bags again. But this time, not to run, to plan. She'd always thought betrayal would come from outside, but now she knew it festered inside bloodlines, dressed as logic, spoken with a father's calm detachment. She rented a studio apartment across town using the last of her savings. A friend from college got her a temporary admin job at a nonprofit. And in the evenings, she dug through paperwork, estate documents, emails. She discovered Carolyn had been influencing her father's business decisions for years, had even pushed for the sale of Lena's mother's property before Lena was out of college. Ivy's law school tuition was being paid not just by that sale, but by a trust Lena's mother had set up that was supposed to remain untouched until Lena turned 30. Lena was 29. One day she received an anonymous envelope at her door. Inside was a photo. Ivy, laughing in a convertible with a local real estate developer, Marcus Boyd, married, 2 kids, and known for shady zoning deals. The photo was time-stamped just a week before Ivy's fancy engagement party. Attached was a note. "Thought you might want the full picture before the wedding." No name, just an address scribbled at the bottom. Lena stared at it, heart thudding, a bitter storm building behind her ribs. Not rage, not yet, but something sharper, sharper and patient. The address led Lena to a modest house on the edge of town, past where the nice sidewalks ended and the road gave up trying to be smooth. She wasn't sure what she expected. Some grizzled private eye? An angry ex? A regretful relative? Instead, the door was opened by a young woman with dark eyes and a wary smile. Her name was Wren. She looked about Lena's age, maybe younger, dressed in joggers and a threadbare hoodie that said, Moss Hill Boxing Club. "You're Lena," she said, not asking, just stating like it was fact. "Come in." The living room was small but clean. A cat stretched lazily on the windowsill. A corkboard by the desk was covered in documents, clippings, and red string. Lena blinked at it, startled. "You sent the photo," she said slowly. Wren nodded. "And the note?" "Why?" Wren motioned toward the couch and sat across from her. "Because I know what it's like to have your whole life stolen out from under you by people who smile while doing it." Lena studied her. "What's your connection to Ivy?" "I used to be with Marcus," Wren said, tone flat. 3 years. He was charming, ambitious, always promising a future. Then one day, he ghosts me. Weeks later, I see him all over town with your sister. At galas, benefits, her arm hooked around his like they're royalty. No one cared he was still married to me on paper. Lena sat back, stunned. "Wait, married?" Wren reached into a file and pulled out a certificate. Marcus Boyd, Wren Ortega, married 6 years ago in Vermont. No divorce filing on record. "He told me it was a temporary thing for taxes, that we'd clean it up later. Then he met Ivy and I became an inconvenience." Lena stared at the paper, then at Wren. "Why didn't you go public?" "I tried," Wren said. "But he's connected. City council. He made sure I lost my job at the architecture firm. Said I was unstable. A spiteful ex. No one believed me. Ivy played her part. Sweet, innocent Ivy. The perfect daughter." Lena's throat tightened. Wren leaned forward. "But your name still carries weight. Especially in Meadowbrook. You're the daughter of Thomas Walsh, and people still whisper about your mom like she was some kind of saint. If you speak up, they'll listen, especially if you have proof." Lena didn't respond right away. She just looked at the wall of research. Property sales, committee minutes, campaign donations, a photo of her father shaking hands with Marcus Boyd outside a golf club. "He's grooming Marcus," Lena said quietly. "Dad wants someone to take over the business side of the family trust. And Ivy? She's the golden ticket." "Until it all burns," Wren said. Back at her apartment, Lena stared at her mother's old jewelry box, the only thing she'd saved from the estate. Inside, hidden beneath the velvet tray, was the will. The one her father claimed had been updated years ago. But the one Lena had was original. Her mother's handwriting still visible in the margins. There it was. "The Berkshire's cabin is to be held in trust for my daughter Lena, not to be sold under any condition until her 30th birthday." He'd lied. And he'd forged the revised version. Lena took a shaky breath. Her fingers traced over the words. The next morning, she visited an attorney, Rachel Dwyer, an old friend from high school, who now ran a private law practice out of a converted bookstore. Rachel was the kind of woman who didn't blink at scandal, but sharpened her lipstick when she smelled it. "Forgery?" Rachel said, eyes lighting up. "If that's true, Lena, this could undo every transaction related to that trust. And invalidate Ivy's tuition claims." Lena handed her the documents. "I need this to be airtight. No whispers. I want facts." Rachel smirked. "I can do better than facts. I can give you leverage." The wedding was 2 weeks away. Ivy had gone full royal. Floral arches, white horses, an open bar list longer than a wine cellar. Lena wasn't invited, of course. But the venue was public, the Grand Marlowe Vineyard, where high society liked to be seen. Rachel's plan was simple, not revenge, just truth. Well-timed, strategically released, fully documented truth. And Lena? She had one job, deliver it. A week before the wedding, Lena stopped by her father's house. Carolyn answered the door in a silk robe with a coffee mug that said wifey vibes. She didn't invite Lena in. I just wanted to return some mail that got sent to my place, Lena said coolly. She handed her a stack of letters, most real, one forged to resemble a court summons. Carolyn glanced at it, frowning. What's this? A mistake, probably, Lena said. Or maybe someone at the district clerk's office finally woke up. Carolyn's fingers tightened on the envelope. Lena turned and walked down the steps, heart pounding. Not rage, just precision. The dominoes would fall soon. But first, Lena had to see Ivy. She booked a hair appointment at the same high-end salon Ivy used. Ivy walked in, already glowing with pre-wedding bliss. Her ring caught the light like a beacon. Her smile was practiced. Perfect. She froze when she saw Lena. "Oh, you," Ivy said. "Didn't think you were still in town." "I'm full of surprises," Lena replied, glancing at the mirror. "Congrats on the wedding, by the way. Must feel great. New ring, new life, same old man." Ivy's expression darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough," Lena said. "And soon, so will Meadowbrook." She stood, tossed a 20 on the counter, and walked out, head high, heart steady, the tremble in her spine now replaced with resolve. By Wednesday, the whispers had started. It began with a quiet lunch at the country club where Carolyn usually held court with her wine-sipping circle of Meadowbrook wives. Someone had gotten a curious letter. A copy of Ivy's wedding announcement, paper-clipped to a scanned copy of a Vermont marriage certificate. No return address. Just a line typed at the bottom. Maybe someone should ask the bride about her other husband. Carolyn's friends were brutal when they scented scandal. That afternoon, Carolyn's SUV peeled out of the club parking lot, and Lena, sipping coffee across the street, watched it disappear with a small, slow smile. That evening, Lena received a message. Unknown number. "You did this. What the hell are you playing at?" She didn't respond. At Rachel's office the next morning, Lena reviewed the legal packet again. Inside was everything: a notarized copy of her mother's original will, a handwriting analysis proving the supposed revised version was a forgery, the marital records between Ren Ortega and Marcus Boyd, screenshots of Ivy and Marcus at multiple events while he was still legally married, transaction records showing trust fund misappropriation, and a letter, unsigned but damning, detailing how Carolyn advised Thomas to restructure the family trust, cutting Lena out completely under the guise of family stability. "Legally, you could tear down half their empire," Rachel said carefully, as if weighing the cost of a bomb before dropping it. "But it's not just about that, is it?" Lena stared at the documents. Her eyes flicked to the engagement photo of Ivy and Marcus on the front page of the local paper. Smiling. Celebrated. Untouched. "No," Lena said. "It's about truth and timing." The Grand Marlowe Vineyard sparkled with lanterns and low jazz the night of the wedding rehearsal. Ivy's dress rehearsal was practically a red carpet event. Real estate tycoons, judges, and even a former state senator on the guest list. Lena wasn't supposed to be anywhere near it, but Rachel had pulled strings. Lena walked into the tasting room that night dressed in a simple black dress, hair back, heels clicking like war drums. Her entrance turned heads, but the moment her father saw her, his entire posture changed. "Lena?" he barked, crossing the room. "What are you doing here?" "I'm invited," she said calmly, producing the RSVP from the assistant of one of the venue sponsors. +1. Rachel emerged from behind her in navy silk, smiling as though she were born in high society. Thomas's voice dropped. "This isn't the time or place." Lena tilted her head. "I thought that's exactly what this was." Before he could answer, Ivy descended the staircase, radiating joy in a designer rehearsal gown. The second she saw Lena, her expression curdled. "You're not welcome here." Lena stepped forward, gently laying a folded packet on the table beside the champagne flutes. "I just came to drop this off, for Marcus." Everyone fell silent. Ivy's brows furrowed. "What is that?" Lena didn't look at her. She looked at Marcus, who stood frozen near the open bar, color draining from his face. Slowly, she slid a copy of the marriage certificate from the packet and set it atop the stack. There it was, in front of half of Meadowbrook's elite. "I think the groom should be honest with the bride," Lena said softly, "before the photographer starts rolling tomorrow." Ivy grabbed the paper and scanned it, her hands trembling. "This is fake. This is a lie. This is—" But Marcus didn't deny it. He didn't move. His silence was volcanic. A camera phone clicked somewhere. Lena left the vineyard with Rachel. Neither of them spoke until they were halfway down the road. "Brutal," Rachel said, glancing over. Lena exhaled. Not yet. The fallout came fast. By morning, the wedding was postponed. Ivy's Instagram went dark. Carolyn's name was removed from the Meadowbrook charity board. Marcus's firm announced his sudden, personal leave of absence. But the scandal was only beginning. Wren's story hit the Meadowbrook Gazette 3 days later, an exclusive interview with evidence, timelines, screenshots, and tears. Framed not as revenge, but as a woman reclaiming her voice. Lena made sure her name stayed out of it. What did make it in the article, however, was a very public quote from Wren. "I only wish someone in Marcus's life had the courage to tell the truth before it went this far. Thankfully, someone did." On the day the forged will was filed in family court, Thomas Walsh didn't even show. His lawyer did. And when the judge reviewed the documents Rachel had prepared, he called for a full hearing. Lena sat silently in the courtroom, her heels pressed into the polished floor, listening to the truth echo for the first time in a room where it had power. She wasn't seeking pity, she wasn't seeking approval. She was reclaiming her place, and it had only just begun. The court date was set for June 17th. That gave Lena 24 days. 24 days to prepare for war, because this wasn't just about the cabin anymore. It wasn't about tuition or Ivy's fake wedding or even Marcus Boyd. It was about every carefully stitched lie her family had wrapped around themselves like silk, threaded with legacy, sealed with money, and defended with quiet cruelty. And now it was unraveling. 2 days after the court hearing announcement, Thomas finally called. The name Dad lit up her screen like it used to when she was 15, waiting for him to tell her she was special, that he was proud. Lena let it ring 5 times before answering. "Lena." His voice was strained, flat. "We need to talk." She stepped out onto her balcony. "Funny how that never seemed urgent until now." "I understand you're angry." "Do you?" She didn't yell, but her voice was taut. "You sold the only thing my mother left me. You let Carolyn cut me out of a trust my name was on, and now you're upset because I finally fought back?" "I did what I thought was best for the family." "You mean for your version of it?" Silence. Then finally, "Come to the house. Tomorrow, noon. Let's talk." Lena nearly laughed. "You still think your house is neutral ground?" "I'm still your father," he said. She hung up without replying. The next day she didn't go alone. She brought Rachel, and she wore the blue blazer her mother once bought her after graduation, soft navy wool, hand-stitched buttons, and the faint smell of lavender if you leaned in close enough. A symbol, not for them, for herself. Carolyn opened the door and visibly recoiled when she saw Rachel. "Legal counsel? Really?" Lena stepped past her. "You hired counsel when you married into this family. I'm just catching up." Thomas was waiting in the study, fire unlit, curtains drawn. He looked older than before, tired around the eyes, but still carried himself like the man who had once commanded boardrooms. He didn't stand. "Let's be clear," Rachel said, sitting beside Lena. "We're not here to negotiate, we're here to inform." "We?" Carolyn snapped, crossing her arms. "This is a family matter." Rachel turned to her. "Correction. It became a legal matter the moment you tampered with a trust fund and advised your husband to sign a forged version of his deceased wife's will." Lena watched her father closely. No denial, no outrage, just quiet shame behind clenched teeth. Thomas looked at her. "What do you want, Lena?" She swallowed, not because she was unsure, because she was certain. I want the truth made public. I want the Berkshire's cabin returned, or its full market value deposited into a new trust in my name. I want written admission that the will you claimed was updated is a forgery. I want an official resignation from the Walsh Family Foundation Board for both you and Carolyn, and I want to be reinstated as executor of anything related to my mother's name. That's blackmail, Carolyn hissed. No, Rachel replied smoothly. That's restitution. Thomas rubbed his eyes. And if we don't? Lena stood. She pulled a slim manila folder from her purse and set it on the table. Inside were 3 copies of a notarized affidavit, one for the court, one for the press, one for the Meadowbrook Historical Society, who still ran annual tours of the Walsh family estate and loved nothing more than a scandal to boost summer attendance. You know what happens if you fight this, Lena said. I've got nothing left to lose. But you? You still care what this town thinks of you. I don't need you to like me. I just need you to comply. They didn't agree, not right then. But when she and Rachel walked out of the house, Lena didn't feel defeated. She felt free. That night, Ivy called. Her voice was tight, almost panicked. Why are you doing this to us? Lena was in bed, the lights off, the ceiling fan humming gently above her. I'm not doing anything to you, she said. I'm just undoing what you all did to me. There was a long pause on the other end. You could have just walked away, Ivy whispered. Lena closed her eyes. I did. For years, and it almost killed me. Ivy didn't respond, but Lena heard something faint in the silence, breath hitching maybe, or just the quiet collapse of someone who had always known the truth and hoped it'd never surface. The next morning, Lena found a package at her door. Inside was a single item, a photo. Her mother, Lena, a much younger Thomas. Taken the day they signed the deed to the Berkshire's cabin. On the back, written in her mother's familiar cursive, for Lena, always, no matter what they try to rewrite. Lena's eyes burned, her hands shook, and for the first time since returning to Meadowbrook, she let herself cry. But the fight wasn't over, because the court date was getting closer, and Thomas Walsh still had tricks up his sleeve. Lena stood outside the county courthouse 3 hours early on the morning of June 17th. She didn't need to be there yet, but she came anyway. To feel the steps beneath her shoes. To stand still long enough to remember the girl who once thought justice was something granted to those who deserved it, not clawed out of stone with blood and patience. She wore her mother's earrings. The pearls caught the morning sun like tiny moons, reflecting strength in quiet, elegant defiance. Rachel arrived soon after, clutching her briefcase and 2 cappuccinos. Trial day, she said, handing Lena a cup. You ready? Lena nodded once. I've never been readier for anything in my life. The courtroom was packed, not with spectators, not yet, but with whispers. Family allies on one side, business contacts and foundation trustees trickling in. Ivy sat in the second row behind the defense table, her makeup lighter than usual, her expression guarded. Marcus Boyd was nowhere to be seen. Thomas sat at the defense table in a tailored suit that couldn't hide the weight hanging off his shoulders. Carolyn sat beside him, lips pursed, arms crossed, spine stiff as a rifle. The judge entered, all rise. Then it began. Rachel led with clarity and force. She presented the original will, the handwriting analysis, the contradictory financial documents, the notarized statement from a former Walsh family accountant confirming Carolyn's unusual influence over trust decisions. Lena sat silently as her name was spoken over and over. Plaintiff, daughter, beneficiary, rightful heir. The judge, a steely woman named Judge Malden, asked sharp, pointed questions. She did not smile. She did not soften. But Lena saw the subtle shift in her eyes as each piece of truth unfolded like a tightly pressed rose. Then came the bombshell. Your Honor, Rachel said, we would also like to present this as Exhibit 19. She handed over the framed photo Lena had received in the package. The back, scanned and documented, bore Lena's mother's handwriting, verified, proven authentic. She made her intentions clear. The estate's violation of that directive was not only unjust, it was unlawful. The room murmured. Carolyn whispered something to Thomas. He didn't turn. Then the defense spoke. Their attorney was polished and impersonal, trying to argue that Lena had abandoned her place in the family, that Thomas had acted in adaptive good faith, that Carolyn had merely offered strategic advisement during a difficult financial period. It was theater. Thin, manufactured theater. Judge Malden didn't blink. She let them finish, then turned to Thomas. Mr. Walsh, do you deny signing a forged revision of your late wife's will? He hesitated. Lena could feel the entire courtroom still itself, like oxygen had fled the room. Thomas finally spoke. I didn't forge it, he said, but I let it happen. Carolyn flinched beside him. I signed what Carolyn gave me. I trusted it was legitimate. He swallowed hard, looking down. I didn't question it, because it made things easier. The silence after that wasn't shock. It was confirmation. When court recessed for the day, no ruling was made yet. The judge promised to review the evidence in full and return with a written judgment within the week. Lena exited through the back to avoid the local press. But Ivy was waiting outside. No cameras, no Carolyn, just her. She looked tired. Her dress was wrinkled. Her eyes held something that wasn't quite guilt, but wasn't pride either. You're going to win, Ivy said quietly. Lena crossed her arms. This wasn't about winning. Ivy nodded once. I know. There was a pause, and then Ivy asked, So what happens after? Lena considered her half-sister, her mother's replacement. The girl raised in Lena's absence with Lena's things and Lena's name ghosting every hallway. That's up to you, Lena said. But I'm done pretending we're the same family. She turned to leave. But Ivy said one more thing, softly. I always envied you. Lena didn't respond. She just kept walking. That night, Lena went to the cabin. It wasn't hers, not yet. Legally, it still belonged to some trust or shell company or fake LLC buried under Carolyn's fingerprints. But she had the spare key, and she knew every board that creaked, every rusted drawer that stuck halfway open. She lit a fire, she made tea, and she sat at the same window her mother once looked through in autumn, watching the trees change. 3 days later, the court's decision arrived by certified letter. Rachel called first. Her voice was shaking with quiet triumph. You got everything, Lena. Everything. The cabin deed would be restored to her name. A formal apology would be issued by the Walsh Family Foundation. Thomas and Carolyn were stripped of financial control over all remaining trusts. And Lena was reinstated as the sole executor of her mother's estate. There was no check, no cash prize, no applause. But the kind of justice she got, it was rarer. It was earned. Still, something lingered, because as satisfying as truth was, Lena couldn't shake the sense that this wasn't the last chapter. Too many eyes were watching, too many secrets still buried, and somewhere in Meadowbrook, Carolyn Walsh had just begun to dig. The summer burned long that year. Everything in Meadowbrook seemed quieter after the ruling, like even the trees were waiting to see what Lena Walsh would do next. But she didn't return to the estate. She didn't go back to city life either. She stayed at the cabin. Alone at first. Then, slowly, not. Wren visited sometimes. She brought wine and stories about design gigs picking up again, about being taken seriously now that her name was cleared. She smiled more, laughed louder. Feels like my spine grew back, she told Lena once. Like I stopped shrinking to fit in their shadows. Rachel came too, usually with paperwork and legal updates, but they'd end up talking about everything else, about the time they auditioned for the school play in 9th grade and bombed, or the time Lena had once cut her own bangs in defiance of Carolyn's lady etiquette rules. They laughed until their stomachs hurt. But beneath it all there was still tension, one thing unfinished. Lena drove back to the Walsh estate on a Sunday in late August. The gates opened slower this time, dragging on rusted hinges that hadn't been oiled in weeks. No gardener had trimmed the hedges. The house was a little less pristine, the flower beds starting to yellow. She knocked on the door. No answer. She rang the bell, waited. Finally, Ivy opened it. Her expression was blank. Hair pulled back, no makeup, a plain tee instead of designer lace. She looked human. "She's gone," Ivy said, stepping aside. "Carolyn packed her things 2 nights ago, took the convertible, left no note." Lena didn't move. "And Dad?" "In his office. But he hasn't said a word since the ruling. Not really. Just sits there, reading papers he never flips." Lena looked toward the hallway. "Do you hate me now?" Ivy blinked. Then, with a faint shrug, "No. I think I hate the way we grew up. How she made us both think love had to be earned in silence." The two sisters stood there, not close, not distant. Just even. Finally. "I kept something for you," Ivy said. "It was behind one of Mom's old books. I think she left it knowing one day we'd try to rewrite her." She handed Lena a sealed envelope. Inside was a photo of Lena as a child, wrapped in her mother's shawl, asleep on the cabin porch. Tucked behind it, a handwritten note. "Lena, if they ever try to convince you you're not enough, remember this. You were mine, before them. And I raised you to fight with silence, yes. But also to roar when the silence is no longer justice. Love always, Mom. Lena clutched the note for a long time, fingers trembling just slightly. She looked at Ivy. "What are you going to do?" Ivy exhaled. "Law school's off the table. The money's gone. But I got a job offer from a women's shelter downtown, admin stuff. I think I need to work somewhere real for a while. Learn what truth actually feels like." Lena nodded once. "Good." Then she turned and walked out. The cabin was hers now, fully, finally. She didn't paint the walls. She didn't refinish the creaky wood floors. She left the house as her mother had loved it. Imperfect, honest, real. She put up the photo of her mother by the fireplace. Framed the note and hung it near the window. She lit a candle every Sunday, not for grief, for gratitude. One morning, nearly a year later, she opened the mailbox and found an invitation. The Meadowbrook Women of Legacy Awards, and Lena Walsh was the keynote honoree. She almost laughed. Then she read the nomination letter, for her bravery in restoring not just a name, but a voice to the silenced women of Meadowbrook. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. The night of the awards, Lena stood in a soft navy dress under soft white lights, the audience filled with women in pearls and power suits, and in the back row, Ivy, Wren, and Rachel, all quietly cheering. She looked at the crowd and said, "I used to think family was something we're born into. Now I know it's something we choose. And sometimes, to protect yourself, you have to let go of the people who let go of you first." She smiled, and this time she meant it. The end checkmark.